You're listening to The People's Voice, May 1st to 15th, 2024. May Day 2024 marks the rising struggle of workers against low wages and falling living standards after years of austerity, high prices, and gargantuan profits by the biggest national and transnational corporations. The number of strikes in 2023 surpasses the high benchmark set in 1986, including a cross-Canada strike by 155,000 federal public service workers, represented by PSAC. And in Quebec, the Common Front strikes led to more than 500,000 workers on an unlimited general strike. As worker solidarity continues to grow, the struggle for better wages, pensions, and working conditions continues apace. The Canadian government's recent decision, supported by all parties in Parliament, to increase military spending to $58 billion by 2029 will be paid for by the working people who will see universal social programs privatized and dismantled to meet growing military costs. There are currently no voices in Parliament today that are speaking up on these issues, but it doesn't have to be this way. Mass, united labor political action can stop this runaway train to disaster. This May Day, workers across the country demonstrated how political action can unite the whole working class against war and reaction, while fighting for peace, progress, environmental action, and conversion of military spending to civilian spending. On April 1st, Israel attacked Iran, bombing its embassy compound in the Syrian capital of Damascus, killing 16 people, including 7 top military officers. This attack was in clear violation of the Vienna Convention and the UN Charter, and symbolizes a serious regional escalation in the genocidal war on Palestine. In response to Israel's aggression, Iran launched an aerial attack on Israeli military targets using 3 waves of drone, cruise, and ballistic missiles, marking the first time that Iran has directly attacked Israel. The ruling party of Iran noted that Israel's attack was intended to provoke and directly involve the Islamic Republic of Iran in military conflict. The UN Security Council convened in order to condemn the Israeli attack, but the US, Britain, and France vetoed the resolution. The Canadian Peace Congress noted that the Canadian government was silent regarding the serious violation of international law. Had the international community and the Security Council of the United Nations vigorously condemned the Israeli aggression, it is possible that further escalation may have been prevented. The consequences of a regional war would have been disastrous for the peoples of the Middle East. It would produce more death, displacement, and destruction, more famine and disease, and could lead to a nuclear strike by Israel on Iran. But Canadians are fighting back. Millions of people across Canada have organized against Israel's genocidal siege of Gaza, forcing Liberal MPs to pressure their party leadership into backing away from its hardline, pro-Israel position. 75 years ago as a military alliance of capitalist countries under the leadership of the US to protect the interests of big business. NATO's early activities included clandestine terrorist attacks and assassinations as part of its Operation Gladio. In the 1990s, NATO orchestrated a devastating bombing campaign in Yugoslavia. In 2011, it overthrew Muammar Gaddafi and instigated the destruction of Libya. And today, it is boldly and foolishly confronting Russia. NATO's goal has never been to safeguard democracy or peace. Every country NATO invades is left with countless people dead and an entire civilian population objectively worse off. Every leader NATO has toppled has been replaced by a far-right government, with NATO even openly recruiting Nazi war criminals into its ranks. Canada's membership in NATO heavily influences the government's foreign policy. In 1999, Canada's Air Force flew 10% of all NATO airstrikes against Yugoslavia, dropping 500 bombs over the course of the campaign, which killed thousands of civilians. Canadian forces dropped another 240 bombs in the NATO enforcement of a no-fly zone in Libya, and aided in the 20-year-long war in Afghanistan, which killed hundreds of thousands of people. Canada has exported $4 billion in weapons to Ukraine since 2022, knowing full well that Ukraine's military formally includes fascist paramilitary groups. Canada also recently helped plan the bombing of Ansar Allah forces in Yemen and exported nearly $30 million worth of weapons to Israel in the first 2 months of its siege on Gaza. Canada's military budget in 2023 was $36.7 billion, which is almost 4 times the cost to make post-secondary education free for all students. But even this is not enough for NATO, which has made every member country pledge to spend 2% of their GDP on military spending, which for Canada would be more than $50 billion annually. At the same time, Canada pursues its exact opposite policy for essential services like healthcare and education, making working people pay for the worst effects of the economic crisis while exponentially rising the costs of groceries, fuel, and rent. But at the same time, we are also seeing what happens when workers in Canada make a strong push against imperialism. Israel's genocide in Gaza has brought working people to the forefront of the united anti-imperialist movement, putting great pressure on the government. Withdrawing from NATO is a crucial step towards an independent Canadian foreign policy of peace, disarmament, and respect for national sovereignty. On April 11th, Canada's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, announced that first-time homebuyers could withdraw up to $60,000 from their RRSPs to put towards a down payment for a house. But this proposal begs the question: how many younger people have substantial savings for a down payment, which is typically 20% of the price of a home? In Canada, the average price of a house is $720,000, meaning that a down payment would cost almost $29,000. Most young Canadians don't have these kinds of savings, and even those who can afford the 20% down payment on an average home are still left with paying more than $4,000 a month in mortgage payments, plus another $1,000 each month for utilities and taxes. Not only is Chrystia Freeland's proposal highly lucrative for banks, but Freeland is also throwing a giant bone to developers, construction companies, and builders. The government's penchant for funding new developments in housing, townhouses, and apartments means higher costs to new owners or tenants, and developmental costs for utilities such as water, gas, or electricity. There are also associated costs to the environment. Carl Elefante, former president of the American Institute of Architects, said the greenest building is the one that already exists. In every city, many older buildings that are empty or unused merely need upgrades in order to be converted into housing. But instead, we see demolitions of existing older housing that is affordable in order to make way for high-end condos and new skyscrapers. Our governments are wedded to the idea that new is better, that fast builds are better, and if you build it, they will come. But boosting the middle class's tax-free home savings account does not help and does not appeal to most young people. That's all for now. If you're interested in strengthening working-class press in Canada, consider lending your support to the People's Voice Fund Drive at pvonline.ca.